The grand ballroom of the Royal Opera House sparkled under countless chandeliers as London's elite gathered for the annual Royal Charity Gala. Princess Catherine Windsor adjusted her emerald silk gown and took a steadying breath. These events had become routine over her 15 years as a member of the royal family, but tonight felt different somehow. The weight of recent personal challenges seemed heavier than usual. "Your Highness, we're ready for your entrance," whispered her private secretary, Margaret, appearing at her elbow with practiced discretion. Catherine nodded, forcing her well-practiced smile into place. The gala supported 3 of her patronages: a children's mental health charity, a music therapy foundation, and an organization helping struggling artists. These causes were close to her heart, but tonight she struggled to summon her usual enthusiasm. The doors opened, and she stepped into the ballroom to polite applause. Dignitaries, celebrities, and philanthropists filled the space, all gathered to support worthy causes while enjoying an evening of entertainment. Catherine moved through the crowd with practiced grace, making conversation with donors and supporters. "Princess Catherine, how wonderful to see you," gushed Lady Pemberton, a prominent society figure. "You look absolutely radiant despite everything that's happened recently." The comment stung more than it should have. The everything referred to the intense media scrutiny following her younger brother's very public struggles with addiction and the family's decision to stage an intervention. The tabloids had been relentless, speculating about family tensions and Catherine's role in the situation. "Thank you, Lady Pemberton. I'm simply focused on tonight's important causes," Catherine replied diplomatically, though her smile felt strained. As she continued her rounds, Catherine caught glimpses of the evening's performers rehearsing on the side stage. The lineup included a renowned opera singer, a classical pianist, and someone called Jessica James, a name she didn't recognize. Margaret had briefed her that Jessica was a young singer-songwriter who worked extensively with music therapy programs for trauma survivors. "The Jessica James performance should be particularly moving, Your Highness," Margaret had mentioned earlier. "She's quite remarkable, though she's been through significant personal challenges recently." Catherine found herself curious about this performer she'd never heard of. In a world where she knew most of the entertainment figures who appeared at royal events, encountering someone new was unusual. The evening's formal dinner proceeded with its usual pageantry. Catherine sat at the high table, making polite conversation with the Archbishop of Canterbury on her left and a prominent businessman on her right. The familiar ritual of state dinners played out around her, multiple courses served by white-gloved staff, toasts to various causes, and carefully orchestrated photo opportunities. But Catherine's mind wandered. Through the tall windows, she could see protesters gathered outside with signs reading, "Privilege while people suffer," and "Royal family, fix your own problems first." The criticism had grown sharper recently, with commentators questioning whether the royal family could truly represent modern Britain while dealing with their own very public scandals. During the fish course, Catherine excused herself briefly. She needed a moment away from the scrutiny, from the endless performance of being perpetually composed and interested. In the ladies' powder room, she stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror. Her makeup was perfect, her hair immaculately styled, her jewelry sparkling under the soft lighting, yet she felt hollow. "Pull yourself together, Catherine," she whispered to her reflection. "Thousands of people benefit from these charities. This isn't about you." When she returned to the dinner, the meal was concluding and preparation for the entertainment portion had begun. The opera singer performed first, delivering a stirring rendition of Nessun Dorma that brought the audience to their feet. The classical pianist followed with a technically brilliant but emotionally distant performance of Chopin. Then Margaret approached Catherine's chair. "Your Highness, Miss James has requested a brief word before her performance. She's quite nervous about performing for you." Catherine nodded, rising to follow Margaret backstage. She expected to encounter another starstruck performer seeking royal validation, a scenario she'd navigated thousands of times. What she found instead was a young woman sitting alone on an equipment case, her head in her hands. Jessica James looked up as they approached, and Catherine was struck by the raw vulnerability in her eyes. This wasn't the polished confidence she typically encountered in performers. Jessica appeared to be in her late 20s, with curly brown hair pulled back simply and wearing a modest black dress that suggested she wasn't accustomed to such formal events. "Your Highness," Jessica said, standing quickly and offering an uncertain curtsy. "I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say how honored I am to perform tonight, especially for causes so close to my heart." There was something in Jessica's voice, a slight tremor that suggested genuine emotion rather than performance nerves. Catherine found herself studying the young woman's face, noting the slight puffiness around her eyes that suggested recent tears. "Please don't apologize," Catherine replied, her formal training taking over. "We're grateful you're sharing your talent tonight. Margaret tells me you work extensively with music therapy programs." Jessica's expression brightened slightly. "Yes, Your Highness. Music saved my life, quite literally. I've seen what it can do for people who are struggling, who feel like they have no voice." The simple honesty of the statement caught Catherine off guard. In her world, people rarely spoke with such unguarded directness. There was something refreshing about Jessica's lack of artifice. "That's remarkable work," Catherine said, meaning it. "What draws you to music therapy specifically?" For a moment, Jessica hesitated, as if deciding how much to share. "I was in a very dark place a few years ago, Your Highness. Lost my parents in a car accident, struggled with survivor's guilt, couldn't see a way forward. Music therapy helped me process emotions I couldn't express any other way." The honesty was startling. Catherine was accustomed to people presenting only their most polished selves in her presence. This young woman was sharing genuine pain and vulnerability. "I'm sorry for your loss," Catherine said softly, and she meant it. "That must have been incredibly difficult." Jessica nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "The song I'm performing tonight, I wrote it during my darkest period. It's about finding hope when everything feels impossible." Something in Jessica's words resonated deeply with Catherine. Though their circumstances were vastly different, she recognized the feeling of struggling to find hope while maintaining appearances. The weight of recent family struggles, public criticism, and personal doubts suddenly felt overwhelming. "Sometimes," Catherine found herself saying, "hope is the hardest thing to hold on to." Jessica looked at her with surprise, perhaps hearing something beyond the typical royal platitudes in Catherine's voice. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, two women dealing with pain in very different but equally challenging ways. "Your Highness," Margaret interrupted gently, "it's time for Miss James to prepare for her performance." Catherine nodded, but found herself reluctant to end this unexpectedly genuine conversation. "I look forward to hearing your song, Miss James. Thank you for sharing something so personal tonight." As Catherine returned to her seat, she felt a subtle shift in her perspective. The evening's performance suddenly mattered in a way it hadn't before. She wasn't just fulfilling a royal obligation. She was about to witness someone courageously sharing their truth through art. The lights dimmed as Jessica took the stage with just a guitar and a simple spotlight. The grand ballroom fell silent in a way that felt different from polite attention. Catherine leaned forward slightly, unexpectedly invested in this performance. Jessica's voice, when she began to sing, was pure and haunting. The song spoke of loss, darkness, and the slow, difficult journey back to light. Her lyrics painted pictures of grief so vivid that Catherine felt them in her chest. But more than sadness, the song carried something else: resilience, determination, the stubborn human capacity to continue despite everything. As Jessica sang, Catherine felt tears gathering in her own eyes. When was the last time she'd allowed herself to feel this deeply? In her world of careful protocol and managed emotions, raw feeling had become a luxury she couldn't afford. The song built to a crescendo about choosing to believe in tomorrow despite today's pain. Jessica's voice soared with conviction that felt earned through suffering. The ballroom remained completely silent, held captive by the authenticity of the performance. When the final note faded, the silence stretched for several heartbeats before erupting into thunderous applause. Catherine found herself on her feet with the rest of the audience, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. She didn't care who saw or what photographs might be taken. This moment felt too important for such concerns. Jessica looked directly at Catherine as she acknowledged the applause, and their eyes met across the crowded room. In that instant, Catherine felt truly seen in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Not as a princess or a symbol, but as a human being wrestling with pain and seeking hope. The evening continued around them, but something fundamental had shifted. Catherine had been reminded of why these charitable causes mattered, not as royal duties to be performed, but as connections to real human experiences. Jessica's courage in sharing her truth had created space for Catherine to acknowledge her own struggles. As the gala concluded, and guests began to disperse. Catherine knew this evening would stay with her long after the formal obligations ended. Sometimes the most important moments happened when you least expected them, delivered by people you'd never heard of who possessed the courage to be genuine in a world that often rewarded pretense. Catherine lingered in the ballroom longer than usual as guests filtered out into the London night. Typically, royal protocol dictated a precise schedule: arrive at the appointed time, fulfill specific obligations, depart according to plan. But tonight felt different. The impact of Jessica's performance had unsettled her in the most necessary way. Margaret approached with her usual diplomatic timing. "Your Highness, the car is ready whenever you'd like to depart. Miss James is packing up her equipment if you'd like to speak with her again." The suggestion hung in the air. Catherine rarely sought out additional interactions at these events, but something pulled her toward the young performer who had shared such raw honesty through her music. "I think I would like that," Catherine said, surprising herself with the decision. They found Jessica carefully placing her guitar in its worn case on the side stage. Up close, Catherine noticed details that hadn't been visible from her seat: the guitar's scratched surface that spoke of years of use, Jessica's hands that trembled slightly as she secured the latches, the careful way she handled her instrument as if it were precious. "Miss James," Catherine approached softly, not wanting to startle her. Jessica looked up, her eyes widening with surprise. "Your Highness, I didn't expect. Thank you so much for staying. Your presence tonight means everything to the charity." "Your performance was extraordinary," Catherine said, and meant it completely. "I've attended hundreds of these events, and rarely has anything moved me quite so deeply." A flush of pleasure crossed Jessica's features, followed quickly by uncertainty. "I hope it wasn't too intense. I sometimes worry that my songs are too heavy for events like this." Catherine found herself stepping closer, lowering her voice. "Sometimes heavy is exactly what we need. Your song spoke to something real. In my world, we don't often encounter such honesty." The comment seemed to surprise Jessica, who tilted her head as if trying to understand what Catherine meant. "Your world must be very different from mine, Your Highness." "More different than you might imagine," Catherine replied, then caught herself. Such personal revelations weren't typical of royal interactions, but Jessica's openness seemed to invite authenticity in return. "I lost my parents when I was 12, Catherine found herself sharing. "Car accident during a state visit. I've never really talked publicly about how that shaped my understanding of loss." Jessica's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm so sorry. That must have been devastating, especially so young, and having it happen so publicly." "Everything in my life happens publicly," Catherine said quietly. "Including grief, apparently. Your song reminded me that pain is universal, regardless of circumstances." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two women who had experienced profound loss finding unexpected connection. The ballroom staff moved around them, clearing tables and dimming lights, but neither seemed eager to end the conversation. "Would you," Catherine started, then stopped. What was she about to suggest? Royal protocol had strict guidelines about spontaneous social interactions, but tonight protocol felt less important than human connection. "Would I what, Your Highness?" Jessica prompted gently. "Would you be interested in visiting some of the music therapy programs you support? I'd like to understand better how music helps people heal." Jessica's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Oh, Your Highness, that would be wonderful. There's a program at St. Margaret's Hospital where I volunteer. They work with trauma survivors, people dealing with PTSD, children who have experienced abuse. The transformations I've witnessed are incredible." "I'd very much like to see that," Catherine said. "Margaret, could you arrange something?" Margaret nodded, though Catherine caught a flicker of surprise in her secretary's expression. Spontaneous charitable visits weren't unusual, but the personal investment Catherine was displaying was notable. As they talked logistics, Catherine found herself genuinely excited about the prospect. When had she last felt this kind of anticipation about a royal engagement? Usually, her calendar felt like a series of obligations to be managed rather than opportunities to be embraced. "I should warn you," Jessica said with a small smile. "It's not a glamorous setting. The hospital program meets in a basement room with folding chairs and a donated piano that's slightly out of tune, nothing like tonight's venue." "Sometimes the most important work happens in basement rooms," Catherine replied. I think I'd prefer that to another ballroom. Jessica laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and delight. I never thought I'd hear a princess say she preferred hospital basements to ballrooms. I'm full of surprises, Catherine said, and realized she was enjoying this conversation more than she'd enjoyed any royal interaction in months. As they prepared to part ways, Jessica hesitated. Your Highness, may I ask you something, and please feel free to tell me it's inappropriate. Catherine nodded, curious. Earlier, when I mentioned finding hope in darkness, you said hope was the hardest thing to hold on to. That didn't sound like something you'd say as a polite response. It sounded personal. The observation was astute and gentle. Catherine felt understood in a way that was both comforting and unsettling. In her position, being truly seen was rare and potentially dangerous. Yet Jessica's interest felt genuinely caring rather than intrusive. You're very perceptive, Catherine said carefully. Recent months have been challenging, family difficulties that have been very public. Sometimes maintaining hope while fulfilling public expectations feels overwhelming. Jessica nodded with understanding. I can't imagine the pressure of having every family struggle dissected in newspapers. At least when I fell apart, only a few people witnessed it. There's something to be said for private breakdowns, Catherine agreed, then immediately wondered if she'd revealed too much. But Jessica's expression remained kind, free of the calculating interest Catherine had learned to fear. This young woman seemed genuinely invested in human connection rather than information gathering. The song you performed tonight, Catherine continued, about finding light in darkness, how did you do it? Actually find your way through? Jessica considered the question seriously. Honestly, one day at a time, one song at a time, and accepting help from people who understood. Music therapy taught me that healing isn't linear, you don't just get better and stay better. It's a process of learning to carry your experiences differently. The wisdom in Jessica's words struck Catherine profoundly. Her royal training had emphasized duty, stoicism, the importance of never showing weakness. But what if healing required something different? What if strength could coexist with vulnerability? That's a beautiful way to think about it, Catherine said. Learning to carry experiences differently rather than trying to forget them. Exactly. The goal isn't to pretend painful things didn't happen. It's to integrate them into who you're becoming rather than letting them define you completely. As they finally prepared to leave, Jessica seemed to gather her courage for one more comment. Your Highness, if I may, tonight, watching you listen to my song, I saw someone who understands pain deeply. That's not weakness. That's what allows you to truly connect with people who are struggling. The observation hit Catherine like a revelation. She'd spent years seeing her emotional struggles as failures of royal composure. What if they were actually sources of empathy and authentic connection? Thank you, Catherine said simply, for your music, for your honesty, and for reminding me that feeling deeply isn't a flaw. As Catherine's car pulled away from the Royal Opera House, she found herself thinking about Jessica's words. The young woman had managed to articulate something Catherine had been struggling to understand about her own recent difficulties. Perhaps her emotional struggles weren't signs of inadequacy, but invitations to deeper compassion. For the first time in months, Catherine felt genuinely hopeful about tomorrow. Not because her problems had disappeared, but because she'd encountered someone who had transformed their own pain into something healing and beautiful. If Jessica could do that, perhaps Catherine could find ways to use her position and experiences more meaningfully. The city lights blurred past her window as Catherine realized she was looking forward to visiting the music therapy program with genuine enthusiasm. She wanted to understand how broken people learned to sing again, how darkness could be transformed into light, how individual healing could become a gift to others. Tonight had reminded her why she'd originally been drawn to charitable work, not as royal duty, but as human connection. Jessica's courage in sharing her truth had created space for Catherine to acknowledge her own need for healing and growth. Margaret reviewed the next day's schedule from the seat beside her, but Catherine's mind was elsewhere. She was imagining basement rooms with folding chairs, out-of-tune pianos, and people brave enough to transform their pain into music. It sounded more appealing than any ballroom in London. 3 weeks later, Catherine found herself descending concrete steps into the basement of St. Margaret's Hospital, a far cry from the marble staircases and red carpets of her usual engagements. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows, and the institutional green paint on the walls showed years of wear. Yet Catherine felt more anticipation than she had for any royal engagement in recent memory. Jessica waited at the bottom of the stairs, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her guitar case slung over her shoulder. The contrast with their first meeting was striking. Gone was the formal black dress and nervous energy of the gala. Here, Jessica moved with quiet confidence, clearly in her element. "Your Highness, welcome to our real world," Jessica said with a warm smile. "I hope you're prepared for something completely different from the other night." Catherine had insisted on a minimal security presence and asked Margaret to wait upstairs. She wanted to experience this environment as authentically as possible, without the usual barriers that separated her from genuine human interaction. "I'm looking forward to it," Catherine replied honestly. "Lead the way." They entered a modest room with fluorescent lighting, folding chairs arranged in a circle, and an upright piano that had clearly seen better days. About 12 people were already seated, a mix of ages and backgrounds united by something indefinable in their expressions. Catherine recognized the look of people carrying invisible wounds. "Everyone," Jessica announced, "I'd like you to meet Catherine, who's interested in learning about our music therapy work." Catherine noticed Jessica's careful introduction, no royal titles, no formal protocol. The group offered friendly nods and hellos, treating her as simply another person interested in their work. It was refreshing and slightly disorienting. "Catherine, would you like to sit anywhere particular?" asked Dr. Sarah Chen, the program coordinator Jessica had introduced earlier. "Wherever there's space," Catherine replied, settling into a folding chair between a woman about her age and an elderly man with kind eyes. Dr. Chen began the session by explaining their approach. Music therapy isn't about musical talent or performance. It's about using sound and rhythm to access emotions and experiences that are difficult to express in words. Today, we're working on songs of resilience, pieces that represent survival and hope. The woman next to Catherine, who introduced herself as Maria, spoke first. "I wrote a song about my daughter, lost her to cancer 2 years ago. For the longest time, I couldn't even say her name without falling apart, but singing about her, it lets me celebrate her life instead of just mourning her death." Catherine felt her throat tighten. Maria's simple honesty about devastating loss struck her deeply. In Catherine's world, such pain would be discussed in careful, diplomatic language designed to maintain composure. Here, raw grief was acknowledged as part of the human experience. "Would you like to share a piece of your song, Maria?" Dr. Chen asked gently. Maria nodded and began singing in a voice roughened by tears but strengthened by love. Her song painted pictures of a little girl's laughter, bedtime stories, and the fierce joy of motherhood. Even in its sadness, the melody carried hope, a mother's determination to keep her child's memory alive through music. When Maria finished, the room held respectful silence. Catherine found herself wiping away tears, no longer concerned about maintaining royal composure. Maria's courage in sharing such intimate pain deserved nothing less than honest emotional response. "Thank you, Maria," Dr. Chen said softly. "Who else would like to share today?" A teenager named Kevin spoke up. "I've been working on a rap about getting out of the gang life. It's hard to explain to people what it's like when violence is all you know, but music helps me tell the story." Kevin's piece was powerful and raw, describing the seductive pull of belonging that gangs offered, the violence that followed, and the difficult journey toward a different life. His rhythms were complex, his wordplay sophisticated, his message deeply personal. Catherine realized she was witnessing something remarkable, people transforming their most difficult experiences into art, using creativity to process trauma and find meaning in suffering. This was healing work at its most fundamental level. The elderly man beside her, introduced as Frank, shared a gentle melody about losing his wife of 50 years. "Alzheimer's took her slowly," he explained. "But music was the last thing she remembered. Even when she didn't recognize me, she could still sing our wedding song." Frank's voice cracked as he performed, but he continued with determination. The song captured decades of love, the devastation of watching a beloved mind disappear, and the bittersweet comfort of musical memory. "Frank," Catherine found herself saying, "that was beautiful. The love in your song is so clear." Frank smiled at her with surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, dear. It helps to share it, keeps her alive somehow." Dr. Chen turned to Jessica. Would you like to share something today? Jessica glanced at Catherine, then nodded. I'd like to perform the song I wrote for my parents. I don't usually do this piece in group settings, but today feels right. Jessica's song was different from the one she'd performed at the gala, more intimate, less polished, but deeply moving. She sang about the phone call that changed everything, the guilt of surviving, the long journey toward accepting that living fully was the best way to honor her parents' memory. As Jessica sang, Catherine understood why this young woman had affected her so deeply at the gala. Jessica possessed the rare courage to transform pain into beauty, to use her own healing journey as a gift to others facing similar struggles. When the session moved to group participation, Catherine found herself included naturally. Dr. Chen handed her a simple percussion instrument and invited her to add rhythm to a collective song about resilience. Catherine had never participated in anything like this, improvised music created by people who were learning to heal together. The song that emerged was imperfect but beautiful, voices blending despite different levels of musical training, percussion adding emphasis to lyrics about surviving darkness and choosing to continue. Catherine's rhythm merged with the others, her voice joining the collective sound of people who had faced devastating loss and chosen to create something beautiful from their pain. During a break, Maria approached Catherine. "You seem familiar with grief," she observed gently. "It shows in how you listen to our stories." Catherine hesitated, then decided to trust Maria's kindness. "I lost my parents when I was 12, car accident. I've never really talked about it openly." Maria nodded with understanding. "Grief is grief, whether you're 12 or 40, whether it happens publicly or privately. It changes the shape of your heart forever." "How do you bear it?" Catherine asked. "How do you keep going when everything feels impossible?" "One day at a time," Maria replied, echoing Jessica's earlier words. "And by finding people who understand. Isolation makes everything worse. Connection makes it bearable." As the session concluded, participants began sharing contact information and making plans to practice together during the week. Catherine watched this community of healing form around shared vulnerability and mutual support. These people were teaching each other how to transform pain into purpose. Jessica approached as Catherine prepared to leave. "What did you think? Was it what you expected?" "It was more than I expected," Catherine replied honestly. "I've never seen anything like this, people using their deepest pain to help each other heal. It's remarkable." "That's what music therapy taught me," Jessica said. "Healing happens in community. We weren't meant to carry our pain alone." Catherine felt something shift inside her as Jessica spoke. For years, she'd carried her own struggles in isolation, believing that royal duty required her to suffer privately. But what if healing required something different? What if sharing her authentic experiences could help others? "Jessica," Catherine said carefully, "would you be willing to meet regularly? I'd like to understand more about this work and perhaps explore how I might contribute more meaningfully." Jessica's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I'd be honored, Your Highness. Catherine," she corrected herself with a smile. "I'd be honored, Catherine." As Catherine climbed the concrete steps back to street level, she carried with her the sound of voices that had chosen to sing despite everything they'd endured. The basement room with its folding chairs and out-of-tune piano had taught her more about resilience than any formal education or royal training. For the first time in months, Catherine felt connected to work that mattered not because of protocol or duty, but because it addressed the fundamental human need for healing and connection. She was beginning to understand that her own struggles might not be obstacles to overcome, but tools for deeper service to others. Over the following months, Catherine's weekly visits to St. Margaret's Hospital became the highlight of her schedule. She had convinced Margaret to list them simply as charitable engagement in her official diary, protecting the privacy of the group while maintaining her commitment to this transformative work. Today marked her 8th visit, and she no longer felt like an observer. The group had welcomed her as Catherine, not as a princess fulfilling obligations, but as a woman working through her own healing journey alongside others who understood struggle. "Today I want to try something different," Dr. Chen announced as the group settled into their familiar circle. "We're going to work on collaborative storytelling through music. Each person will add a verse to a collective song about transformation." Catherine felt the familiar flutter of nervousness that came with stepping outside her comfort zone. In 8 weeks, She had learned to participate in group songs, to share simple rhythms, and to listen without judgment. But creating lyrics in front of others still felt vulnerable. Jessica, who had become Catherine's unofficial guide in this new world, caught her eye and offered an encouraging smile. Their friendship had deepened beyond their initial connection at the gala. Catherine found herself looking forward to their conversations before and after group sessions, discussions that ranged from music theory to philosophy to the challenges of living authentically in a world full of expectations. "Who would like to start our song?" Dr. Chen asked. Frank, the elderly widower who had become something of a group patriarch, raised his hand. "I'll give it a try." He moved to the piano and played a simple, gentle melody while singing. "Once I walked in darkness, couldn't see the way. Lost someone so precious, thought I'd never pray. But slowly light came creeping through the cracks of my despair. Showed me love lives on when we learn how to share." The melody was beautiful in its simplicity, and Frank's verse established a theme of transformation through loss. Maria went next, adding her own verse about finding strength in community, her voice growing more confident with each line. Kevin contributed a rap verse that spoke about choosing a different path despite overwhelming obstacles, his rhythmic delivery adding energy and contemporary relevance to the evolving song. As the song progressed around the circle, Catherine felt her anxiety building. What could she contribute that would be authentic without revealing too much about her specific circumstances? How could she share her truth while respecting the privacy necessary for her position? When her turn arrived, Catherine moved to the piano bench beside Frank, her hands trembling slightly as she found the melody. The room fell quiet, and she realized the group was waiting with the same patient support they offered everyone. She began to play, letting the melody guide her words. "Behind the smile I wear, there's a heart that's learned to break. Every role I play, every step I take. People see the surface, think they know my story. But healing means showing scars, not just glory." The verse emerged more honestly than she had planned. As she sang, Catherine felt something releasing inside her, the exhaustion of constant performance, the isolation of public life, the grief she had carried privately for so many years. When she finished, the room held respectful silence. Then Jessica began to sing, her verse building directly on Catherine's contribution. "We all wear masks sometimes to protect our tender hearts. But music breaks the walls down, shows us where the healing starts. In this circle of the broken, we learn to be whole. By sharing all our pieces, not just playing our role." The collaboration felt magical. Catherine's willingness to be vulnerable had created space for Jessica to address the courage required for authenticity, and their combined verses deepened the song's message about the relationship between honesty and healing. As the song continued around the circle, each person building on themes of transformation, community, and the courage required for genuine healing, Catherine realized she was experiencing something entirely new. For the first time in her adult life, she was participating in a creative endeavor where her royal status was irrelevant. Her contribution mattered because of its emotional honesty, not because of who she was in the outside world. When the song concluded, the group sat quietly, absorbing what they had created together. Dr. Chen broke the silence gently. "What did that feel like for everyone?" "Powerful," Maria said immediately. "I felt connected to something bigger than my individual story." "Like we were writing a song about all of us at once," Kevin added, "but it was still personal." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "Music has always been my language for feelings too big for regular words. Today it felt like we were speaking that language together." Catherine found herself speaking before she could second-guess her words. "It felt like the first time I've been completely honest in years, scary and liberating at the same time." Her comment drew understanding nods from around the circle. These people, who had all struggled with trauma and loss, recognized the courage required for emotional honesty. After the formal session ended, Jessica approached Catherine as the others gradually departed. "Would you like to get coffee? There's something I want to talk to you about." They walked to a small cafe near the hospital, a far cry from the formal settings where Catherine usually conducted business. The anonymity of being two women having coffee on a Tuesday afternoon felt precious. "I have an idea," Jessica said once they were seated with their drinks. "But I want your honest reaction, not your polite princess response." Catherine laughed, I think after 8 weeks you know the difference. The Regional Music Therapy Conference is next month. They are looking for speakers who can address the intersection of public service and therapeutic arts. I was wondering if you'd consider presenting with me. The suggestion caught Catherine off guard. Public speaking was second nature to her, but speaking about personal healing journey was entirely different from delivering remarks about charitable causes. What would we talk about? Catherine asked carefully. The power of authentic connection in healing communities. How vulnerability creates stronger support systems than polished presentations. How people in positions of leadership, whether that's royalty or any other role, can model emotional honesty in ways that give others permission to be human. Jessica's proposal was both exciting and terrifying. It would mean publicly acknowledging her own healing journey, speaking about topics far more personal than her usual royal addresses. I'd be speaking as myself, not as a representative of the royal family, Catherine said, thinking through implications. Exactly. As Catherine, who happens to be on a healing journey that's taught her about the importance of music therapy. Your royal connection might help bring attention to the field, but your personal experience is what would make the presentation meaningful. Catherine considered the proposal. 3 months ago, she would have dismissed such an idea immediately. The risk of appearing unprofessional, of revealing too much about personal struggles, would have seemed unacceptable. But 8 weeks in that hospital basement had changed her understanding of strength and leadership. She had watched Frank sing about devastating loss while maintaining dignity, seen Maria transform grief into advocacy for other bereaved parents, observed Kevin use his story of violence and redemption to mentor other young people leaving gang life. What if leadership included modeling emotional courage? What if her platform could be used to normalize seeking help and talking openly about mental health and healing? I need to think about it, Catherine said honestly, and discuss it with my team, but Jessica, I'm not immediately saying no, which surprises me. Jessica smiled with understanding. That's more openness than I expected. The conference organizers would be thrilled to have your voice, but only if it feels authentic to you. This work is too important for anyone to participate without genuine commitment. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Catherine felt a familiar sense of anticipation about possibility. Jessica's proposal represented a chance to use her position in service of something deeply meaningful, not just supporting charitable causes, but actively modeling the kind of emotional honesty that could help others seek help and healing. Can I ask you something? Catherine said as they gathered their things. What made you suggest this? Why do you think I should speak at the conference? Jessica considered her answer carefully. Because you've been on a real healing journey and people can sense authenticity. Because you have a platform that could normalize conversations about mental health and emotional wellness. And because you've shown genuine courage in letting yourself be changed by this work rather than just observing it. The walk back to the hospital where Catherine's car waited felt different than usual. Instead of feeling the familiar weight of returning to royal obligations, Catherine felt energized by possibility. Jessica's proposal had planted a seed that was already beginning to grow into something larger, a vision of how her unique position might serve healing and connection rather than just duty and protocol. For the first time in years, Catherine was genuinely excited about the possibility of public speaking, not as an obligation to be managed, but as an opportunity to contribute meaningfully to work that mattered. The morning of the Regional Music Therapy Conference, Catherine stood before her bedroom mirror adjusting a simple navy blazer over a white blouse. She had chosen her outfit carefully, professional but not formal, approachable rather than intimidating. Today she would speak not as Princess Catherine fulfilling royal duties, but as Catherine, a participant in healing work who wanted to share what she'd learned. The decision to accept Jessica's invitation had required weeks of careful consideration and multiple conversations with her advisors. The Royal Communications team had initially expressed concerns about the personal nature of the proposed presentation, but Catherine's conviction had grown stronger with each discussion. "Your Highness," Margaret said, entering with her usual diplomatic precision, "the car is ready. Ms. James is already at the conference center for sound checks." "Thank you, Margaret, and remember, today I'm simply Catherine, conference presenter." Margaret nodded, though Catherine caught the slight smile that suggested her secretary's amusement at this departure from protocol. Over the months of visits to St. Margaret's Hospital, Margaret had witnessed Catherine's transformation from dutiful royal to genuinely engaged advocate. The conference center buzzed with activity as Catherine arrived. Music therapists, healthcare workers, and advocates from across the region gathered in small groups, their conversations animated by shared passion for therapeutic arts. Catherine felt the familiar flutter of performance nerves, but underneath lay a deeper sense of purpose she hadn't experienced during traditional royal speeches. Jessica appeared at her elbow, radiating calm confidence. "Ready for this." "As ready as I'll ever be," Catherine replied honestly. "Though I have to admit, this feels entirely different from any public speaking I've done before." "Because it's real," Jessica said simply. "You're not delivering someone else's message about causes you support. You're sharing your own experience of healing. That makes all the difference." They made their way to the main auditorium, where about 300 people filled the seats. Catherine noted the diversity of the audience, young and old, representing different therapeutic approaches and various stages of their own healing journeys. These were people who understood the courage required for vulnerability. Dr. Patricia Williams, the conference organizer, introduced them warmly. "Today, we're honored to hear from two women whose work exemplifies the transformative power of music therapy. Jessica James brings years of experience in trauma recovery and community building, while Catherine Windsor offers insights into how healing work can inform public service and leadership." Catherine appreciated the straightforward introduction that positioned her as a colleague rather than a celebrity guest. As they took the stage, she felt the familiar focus that came with important work. Jessica began their presentation by sharing her own story, the loss of her parents, her struggle with survivor's guilt, and her discovery of music therapy as a path to healing. Her openness set a tone of authenticity that helped Catherine relax into her own prepared remarks. "When Jessica invited me to join this work," Catherine said, taking her turn at the podium, "I thought I was coming to observe how music therapy helps others. What I discovered was that I needed healing myself." A ripple of attention moved through the audience. Catherine had never spoken publicly about personal struggles or healing needs. Like many people in leadership positions, I had learned to compartmentalize emotional pain. I thought strength meant handling difficulties privately, never showing vulnerability. But participating in music therapy groups taught me that isolation makes suffering worse, while authentic connection makes healing possible. Catherine spoke about her weekly visits to St. Margaret's Hospital, carefully protecting the privacy of individual group members while sharing what she'd learned about the relationship between honesty and healing. She described her initial discomfort with emotional expression and her gradual understanding that vulnerability could coexist with strength. "I've spent my entire adult life in public service," Catherine continued, "but I had never understood the difference between serving from a place of duty and serving from a place of authentic connection to human struggle. Music therapy taught me that difference." The audience listened with focused attention as Catherine described watching Frank sing about losing his wife. Maria transformed grief into advocacy. Kevin used hip-hop to process his journey away from violence. She spoke about learning to participate rather than just observe, to contribute her own voice to collective songs about resilience and hope. "One of the most powerful aspects of music therapy," Catherine said, "is how it creates equality in suffering and healing. In our group sessions, everyone's pain matters equally. Everyone's voice contributes to our collective songs. Titles and positions become irrelevant when we're working together to transform difficulty into art." Jessica joined Catherine at the podium for their collaborative portion of the presentation. Together, they demonstrated how group songwriting worked, inviting the audience to participate in creating verses about hope and community. The auditorium filled with voices as mental health professionals, therapists, and advocates added their own words to a spontaneous song about the courage required for healing work. During the question period that followed, a young therapist asked Catherine how her music therapy experience had changed her approach to other royal duties. "It's made me more interested in authentic connection than polished performance," Catherine replied. "When I visit hospitals or schools now, I'm looking for opportunities to have real conversations about struggle and resilience rather than just formal interactions. Music therapy taught me that people can sense when you're being genuine, and they respond to authenticity in ways that formal protocol never achieves." An older man in the audience stood up. "Your Highness, "I'm sorry, Catherine. My wife has been dealing with depression following our son's death. She won't consider therapy, says it's a sign of weakness. What would you say to someone like her?" Catherine felt the weight of the question and its personal importance to this man. "I would tell her that seeking help requires more courage than suffering alone. That healing doesn't mean forgetting her son or moving on from grief. It means learning to carry love and loss together in ways that honor both her son's memory and her own need to continue living meaningfully." The man's eyes filled with tears as he nodded gratefully. Catherine realized that her answer had come not from royal training, but from months of listening to others share their struggles and wisdom about carrying pain. As their presentation concluded, Catherine felt a profound sense of completion unlike anything she'd experienced after traditional royal speeches. This had been real contribution to important work rather than ceremonial obligation. During the lunch break, conference attendees approached them with enthusiasm and gratitude. A music therapist working with veterans shared how Catherine's comments about leadership and vulnerability would help her encourage military personnel to participate more fully in group sessions. A hospital administrator mentioned plans to expand their music therapy program based on what they'd heard about its impact. Jessica found Catherine near the registration table, both of them surrounded by people eager to continue conversations about integrating therapeutic arts into various healthcare and community settings. "How does it feel?" Jessica asked when they had a brief moment of privacy. "Like the most important speech I've ever given," Catherine replied honestly. "And the scariest, but also the most authentic." "You've found your voice," Jessica observed. "Not your royal voice or your charitable patronage voice, but your real voice as someone committed to healing work." As the afternoon sessions continued, Catherine participated in workshops about trauma-informed care, community building through arts therapy, and the intersection of mental health advocacy and public policy. Each conversation deepened her understanding of how therapeutic approaches could inform broader social healing. During the final plenary session, Dr. Williams asked Catherine to offer closing remarks. Standing before the group again, Catherine felt the full weight of the transformation she'd undergone since that evening at the Royal Opera House, when Jessica's song had first moved her to tears. "6 months ago, I thought my role was to support important causes from a respectful distance," Catherine said. "Music therapy taught me that the most meaningful support comes from genuine participation in healing work. You've shown me that leadership can mean modeling emotional courage, that strength includes acknowledging our need for help and community." She paused, looking out at the faces of people dedicated to helping others transform pain into growth. "I came into this work thinking I was supporting music therapy. What I discovered was that music therapy was supporting me, teaching me how to live and serve more authentically. Thank you for welcoming me into this community of healing. Thank you for showing me that the most important work happens when we're brave enough to be human together." The standing ovation that followed felt different from the polite applause Catherine was accustomed to receiving. This response came from people who recognized authentic commitment to shared values and work. As Catherine and Jessica gathered their materials and prepared to leave the conference center, Catherine realized that this day had marked a fundamental shift in how she understood her purpose and potential. Music therapy had given her tools for personal healing, but more importantly, it had shown her how to use her platform in service of deeper human connection and community healing. "What's next?" Jessica asked as they walked toward their cars. Catherine smiled, feeling energized by possibility. "I want to help establish music therapy programs in more hospitals and community centers. I want to speak about the importance of emotional honesty in leadership. And I want to keep participating in our group at St. Margaret's, not as research for other work, but because it's where I continue to learn about becoming more fully human." Jessica's embrace goodbye carried the warmth of genuine friendship and shared commitment. As Catherine drove home through London's evening traffic, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from that overwhelming gala night to today's authentic contribution to healing work. The young woman who had courageously shared her song about finding hope in darkness had become more than a chance encounter. Jessica had become a guide into work that was transforming Catherine's understanding of service, leadership, and authentic human connection. For the first time in years, Catherine felt genuinely excited about tomorrow, not because her problems had disappeared, but because she had discovered meaningful work that used both her position and her personal experience of struggle in service of something larger than herself. Music therapy had taught her that healing happened in community, and she was committed to helping create more communities where people could find their voices and transform their pain into sources of strength for themselves and others.